Shalom everyone, welcome to another episode in our video series called In Those Days at This Time. My name is Rabbi Mendy Kesselman from Chabad of Frisco, Texas. Today we are going to be talking about the 17th day in the Hebrew month of Sivan, which corresponds this year to Tuesday, June 9th. So let's get straight to it. When it comes to the 17th day of Sivan, historically, something interesting that happened in Jewish history on this day. And that is as follows. On Yud Zayin Sivan, the 17th day of Sivan, this is the day that Noah's Ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, approximately in the year 1656, from the creation of the world. So in our count of 5,780 years, it was in the year 1656 on this day, the 17th of Sivan, that the ark, after floating and being kind of going around on the water, came finally to rest. So let's take a look at the timeline of this, how this came to be. How long Noah was in the ark for, and other such things to understand this a little bit better. So we begin with looking at a verse that comes from Bereshis, Genesis chapter 7, verse 11. And the verse reads as follows. It was in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month. On this day, all the springs of the great deep were split, and the windows of the heavens opened up. So in simple, this is the day that the great flood of Noah began. Now, when the Torah says it's the second month, when is the second month? So we actually have an argument, but the more accepted opinion is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, and he says this refers to the month of Mar Cheshvan. So Tishrei is the first month. In this context, that's when we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. That's kind of when we celebrate the creation of the world. So the second month would be the month of Cheshvan. So if it's the 17th day of the second month, we're talking about the 17th day of the month of Cheshvan. That's basically when the world started to flood and the water started to come down. If we look throughout some more verses describing the timeline, so let's go to Bereshis, Genesis chapter 8, verse 3. The Torah tells us, Vayashuvu hamayim me'al haaretz. The waters receded off the earth more and more. So after the great big flood, which destroyed everything, the water starts receding, and the water diminished at the end of 150 days. So at the end of 150 days, the water starts receding for us. And Rashi does the calculation for us of when is 150 days later. So if the water began it started to flood on the 17th of Sivan, but Rashi explains to us that it was only on the 27th day of Kislev, which means 40 days after the rain started, that the rain stopped. And Rashi does the math for us that he says, well, there's then 3 days left in the month of Kislev, 29 days in the month of Tevet, and then you have Shvat, Adar, Nisan, and Iyar, which total 118 days, making it a grand total of 150 days. So this would leave us with the first day of the Hebrew month of Sivan. So if it starts raining on the 17th day of Mar Cheshvan, it rains for 40 days till the 27th day of Kislev. The Torah tells us 150 days later, which Rashi calculates for us is the first day of the month of Sivan, is when the waters start receding. However, it's only 17 days later that the ark is actually able to rest on something. And for that, we go to Genesis chapter 8, verse 4, where over there the Torah tells us clearly that Vatanach HaTeva, the ark came to rest in the 7th month, on the 17th day of that month, on the mountains of Ararat, commonly understood as the Armenian highlands near Turkey, these mountains of Ararat. And that's when the ark finally came to rest for the first time. So we see that the Torah says it's the 7th month, and the Torah says it's on the 17th day. And Rashi explains to us that what the Torah means is, when we say the 7th month, it means the 7th month from when the rain stopped, which would leave us, the rain stopped in the month of Kislev. So if you count 7 months from Kislev, we have Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan, which of course is the month that we're in. So according to that calculation from Rashi, the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat on the 17th day of Sivan, which is the 7th month from Kislev, which is when the rain stopped. So just a quick recap of this situation that happened. According to the commentary of Rashi, the water started to rain on the 17th day of Cheshvan. It stopped raining 40 days later on the 27th day of Kislev. 150 days later, the water began to recede, which would be Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month of Sivan. And finally, 17 days later, on the 17th day of the month of Sivan, which is 7 months from when the water stopped, when it stopped raining, the ark was able to rest on a mountain, which was the mountains of Ararat. And so the ark rested there. Interestingly, Noah wasn't able to come out until then. I mean, it was only the mountaintops that were dry, but Noah actually waited few months more, till almost an entire year from when, even more than an entire year from when he had gone in to the ark, and only then, a few months later, again in the month of Cheshvan, was he able to come out. And of course, the ark remained there, sitting over there. Talking about the ark remaining on Mount Ararat, I want to just share with you a very interesting midrash, that the midrash called Yalkut Shimoni tells us that during the story of Purim, so we're talking about many years later, after the entire story of Haman, we know, after the story of Noah and the ark, so we know that Haman built a gallows 50 cubits, called 50 amot, high, with his intention of hanging Mordechai on it. So the Yalkut Shimoni, this midrash, tells us very interesting that what's the significance of 50 cubits, 50 amot? The significance is that Haman, one of his children, was the governor of the province where Noah's ark was located, and he provided Haman with an ark, with a beam from the ark of Noah. And we know from the Torah that Noah's ark was 50 cubits wide. Much longer, but 50 cubits wide. So that's just kind of an interesting historical tidbit, according to the Midrash, that the ark just remained in this mountain range of Ararat. And we find other references that people would kind of take wood from it and use it as amulets, protection, etc., etc. So that's just a little bit of a historical tidbit about Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. The 17th day of Sivan, the day that Noah's ark came to rest on Mount Ararat.